The research vessel Endeavour floated in the darkness of space, far from any star that humans called home. Captain David Cole stood at the observation window and looked out at the brown dwarf below. It was a failed star, too small to burn bright, but large enough to hold secrets in its thick atmosphere. 300 years had passed since humanity first left Earth. They had spread across the stars, met dozens of alien species, and joined something called the Galactic Council. But humans were still considered young. The other species looked at them like older siblings look at a child learning to walk. Humanity had potential, they said, but they were not ready for the true mysteries of the universe. David did not care what the aliens thought. He had spent 20 years exploring the unknown corners of space. His ship carried scientists, engineers, and dreamers. They searched for knowledge, not approval. Dr. Emma Park walked onto the bridge. She was the lead scientist on this mission, an expert in ancient alien civilizations. Her eyes were tired but excited. She had not slept in 2 days. "Captain," she said, "you need to see this." David turned from the window. "What did you find?" Emma led him to her workstation. Screens covered the wall, each showing different data streams. She pointed to one that displayed a wave pattern, rising and falling in perfect rhythm. "We picked this up an hour ago," Emma said. "It is coming from inside the brown dwarf." David studied the pattern. "That looks artificial." "It is artificial," Emma confirmed. "The signal repeats every 47 seconds. No natural phenomenon does that. Something is down there, Captain. Something built by intelligent hands." Lieutenant Ryan Hayes looked up from his navigation console. He was young, barely 30, but he was the best pilot David had ever worked with. "The brown dwarf's atmosphere is too thick for our ships," Ryan said. "We cannot go down there." "We can send a probe," Emma suggested. "It will not survive long, but it might last long enough to see what is making that signal." David thought about this. Protocol said he should report the discovery to Earth and wait for instructions. That would take months. By then, some other ship might arrive and claim the find. Or worse, the Galactic Council might declare the area restricted. "Launch the probe," David ordered. The crew worked quickly. Within an hour, a small unmanned probe dropped from the Endeavour and began its descent into the brown dwarf. The atmosphere was a soup of hydrogen and helium, swirling in storms larger than planets. The probe's cameras showed nothing but orange and red clouds at first. Then the probe broke through a layer of clouds, and everyone on the bridge stopped breathing. Shadows appeared on the screen. Massive shadows. They were geometric shapes, perfect spheres and pyramids, floating in the gas giant's depths. Each one was enormous. The computer calculated their size, and the numbers made no sense. "That cannot be right," Ryan whispered. Emma checked the data 3 times. "It is right," she said, her voice shaking. "Those objects are each the size of Earth's moon. Some are larger." David gripped the railing in front of him. "Ships," he said. "Those are ships. They must be billions of years old," Emma added. "The brown dwarf formed when our galaxy was young. Whatever civilization built these, they existed before almost everything else in the universe." The probe descended lower, getting closer to the nearest sphere. Its surface was smooth, made of some crystal material that reflected the dim light of the brown dwarf's core. There were no seams, no windows, no visible engines. It was perfect. Then the probe died. The pressure and heat finally destroyed it. The screens went dark. For a long moment, no one spoke. David was the first to find his voice. "How many ships are down there?" Emma looked at the data they had gathered. "At least 12 that we could see. There might be more hidden deeper. And they have been sitting there for billions of years," David said slowly. "Waiting." Ryan shook his head in disbelief. "Waiting for what?" No one had an answer. David made a decision. He walked to the communications console and began recording a message. "This is Captain David Cole of the United Earth Fleet vessel Endeavour. We have discovered artificial structures of unknown origin inside the Kepler 442 brown dwarf. The structures appear to be spacecraft of impossible size and age. This is not a drill. This is not a mistake. We have found something that changes everything we know about the galaxy. Requesting immediate support and scientific teams." Cole out. He sent the message toward Earth. It would take weeks to arrive and weeks more for any response to reach them. But David knew that once this news spread, nothing would ever be the same. Emma sat down heavily in her chair. "The Galactic Council has records going back 2 billion years, she said quietly. Their oldest members remember civilizations that rose and fell before Earth even had life. But nothing in their records mentions anything like this. These ships are older than their entire history, which means whoever built them was here first," David said. "Before the Council. Before anyone." The weight of that truth hung in the air. For 300 years, humans had been treated as newcomers to the galactic stage. They were told to be patient, to learn from their elders, to accept their place at the bottom of a very old hierarchy. The alien species of the Council had technology that seemed like magic. They had wisdom gained over millions of years, and they had always made humans feel small. But now, floating above an ancient brown dwarf, David Cole looked at those impossible ships and felt something new. He felt that humanity was standing at the edge of a door that had been closed for billions of years. And somehow, they were the ones who had found the key. "We stay here," David announced to his crew. "We guard this location until help arrives. No one else learns about this until Earth decides what to do." His crew nodded. They understood. Somewhere far away, the message was already racing through space, carrying news that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. Humanity had found something that the oldest species had never known existed. And in the quiet darkness of space, the planet-sized ships waited in their ancient slumber. As if they had always known that one day, someone would come. The galaxy was about to learn that everything it believed about history was wrong. And humanity, the young species that everyone had dismissed, was about to inherit something beyond imagination. 6 months had passed since Captain David Cole sent his message to Earth. Now, the space around the brown dwarf was filled with ships. Hundreds of human vessels floated in formation, their lights blinking against the endless dark. This was the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled in one place. Admiral Grace Mitchell stood on the bridge of the flagship, a massive warship called the Resolute. She was a tall woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that had seen many battles. But she had never seen anything like what waited below. "Status report," she said calmly. An officer responded. "All ships in position, Admiral. The gravity manipulators are online and ready. We can begin extraction on your order." Grace nodded slowly. Humanity had spent the last 6 months preparing for this moment. Their best scientists had designed a system that could manipulate gravity itself, bending it like a river to pull objects from deep within the brown dwarf. It was experimental technology, never tested on this scale. But they had no choice. The ships down there were too important to leave buried. A door opened behind Grace, and Ambassador Daniel Kim walked onto the bridge. He was a diplomat, not a soldier, and he looked uncomfortable surrounded by military officers. Behind him came an alien figure. Overseer Vornik was a representative of the Galactic Council. His species had skin like gray stone and eyes that glowed faint blue. They were one of the oldest races in the known galaxy, and they did not trust humans. "Admiral Mitchell," Vornik said in a voice that sounded like grinding rocks, "my government has concerns about this operation." Grace turned to face him. Your concerns are noted, Overseer. You do not understand what you are doing, Vornik continued. Those objects down there are older than recorded history. You cannot simply pull them out like treasures from a cave. There could be consequences. There will definitely be consequences, Grace agreed. That is why we are doing this carefully. Vornik's glowing eyes narrowed. The Council demands that any technology recovered be shared equally among all species. Ambassador Kim stepped forward. That will be discussed once we know what we are dealing with. Until then, this is a human operation in human-controlled space. Vornik made a sound of displeasure but said nothing more. He had come as an observer, not a commander. He could watch, but he could not stop what was about to happen. Grace turned back to her officers. Begin extraction. The human fleet activated their gravity manipulators. Invisible forces reached down into the brown dwarf's atmosphere, searching for the massive shapes hidden within. The process was slow and delicate. One mistake could tear the ancient ships apart. Hours passed. The tension on every bridge was unbearable. Scientists monitored their instruments while soldiers stood ready for anything. Then, something began to rise from the clouds. It emerged slowly, like a whale surfacing from an ocean. A perfect sphere made of crystal that caught the light of distant stars. It was 12,000 kilometers wide, larger than Earth itself. The surface was smooth and beautiful, covered in patterns that seemed to shift and change as people watched. It is magnificent, Emma Park whispered. She had transferred to the Resolute to be part of this moment. Her entire life had led to this discovery. The sphere floated free of the brown dwarf's atmosphere and hung in space, silent and still. Every sensor in the fleet pointed at it, gathering data. I am reading no power signatures, an officer reported. The ship appears to be dormant. Grace studied the sphere on her screens. Can we dock with it? Find a way inside? There are no visible openings, Emma said. No hatches, no ports. The surface is completely seamless. They tried everything. Scanning beams, communication signals, even physical contact, sending small craft to touch the crystal surface. Nothing worked. The sphere remained closed, a mystery wrapped in silence. Then Emma had an idea. Let me go, she said to Admiral Mitchell. Let me touch it myself. In person, Grace frowned. That is dangerous. We do not know what will happen. We know nothing will happen if we keep doing what we are doing, Emma replied. These ships have been waiting for billions of years. Maybe they are waiting for something specific. Maybe they are waiting for us. It was a wild guess, but no one had a better idea. An hour later, Emma Park floated in a small shuttle toward the sphere's surface. Her heart was beating fast. She had studied ancient civilizations her entire career, but she had never imagined standing on something this old. The shuttle landed gently on the crystal surface. Emma stepped out in her spacesuit and walked forward. The crystal beneath her feet was warm, even through her boots. She reached out her gloved hand and pressed it. Against the surface. Light exploded from the point of contact. Emma stumbled backward as the crystal began to glow. Patterns raced across the entire sphere. Billions of lights activating in sequence. The dormant ship was waking up. On the Resolute, alarms screamed. The sphere is powering up. An officer shouted. Energy readings are off the scale. Vornik stepped back, fear crossing his stone face for the first time. What have you done? A section of the sphere opened, revealing a passage leading inside. Light poured out, warm and golden, like sunlight from a world that had died before the stars were born. Emma stood at the entrance, staring into the light. A voice spoke in her mind, not in words, but in feelings and images. It welcomed her. It had been waiting so long. She stepped inside. The interior of the sphere was vast beyond comprehension. There were cities inside, empty but perfect. built for beings that no longer existed. Gardens of crystal trees stretched toward an artificial sun at the sphere's core. Rivers of light flowed through channels carved into the walls. It was a world unto itself, preserved across time, and it responded to Emma. Doors opened as she approached. Lights activated where she walked. The ship recognized her, not as an individual, but as something deeper. She reached a central chamber where a pillar of light rose from the floor. Within the light, she saw images. A galaxy younger than imagination. A species that looked human, but older, wiser, different. They built these ships, these arcs, as gifts for their children. Then they have left, transcending physical form, becoming something beyond flesh and blood. They were called the First, and they had seeded humanity across the galaxy billions of years ago. Emma fell to her knees. Tears ran down her face inside her helmet. Humanity was not a young species stumbling into the stars. Humanity was the inheritor of the oldest civilization that had ever existed. She returned to the Resolute with this knowledge. When she told Admiral Mitchell and Ambassador Kim what she had learned, they sat in stunned silence. When Vornik heard the truth, his glowing eyes went dark with shock. "This cannot be," Vornik said. "Humans are children. They have only had spaceflight for 3 centuries. We lost our memory," Emma replied quietly. "Something happened long ago. We forgot who we were, but we are remembering now." The sphere, which Emma had named Genesis, remained open only to humans. When Vornik tried to approach the entrance, invisible forces gently pushed him away. The ship knew who its masters were. News spread across the galaxy like fire. Humans were not newcomers. Humans were the descendants of the first, the oldest race ever to exist. And they had just inherited technology that made everything else look like toys. The Galactic Council met in emergency session. Fear spread among species who had spent millions of years believing they were the elders of the cosmos. Some called for peace and cooperation. Others whispered about war. But on the Genesis, Emma Park walked through gardens that had waited billions of years for footsteps. She knew that humanity's greatest test was just beginning. They had been given power beyond imagination. What mattered now was what they chose to do with it. 3 months had passed since the Genesis opened its doors to humanity. Inside the planet-sized ark, teams of scientists worked day and night to understand what they had found. Every corridor held wonders. Every chamber revealed secrets that rewrote the laws of physics. Dr. Michael Reed walked through a hall of machines that hummed with quiet power. He was a physicist, trained to understand the building blocks of the universe. But nothing in his education had prepared him for this. The technology inside the Genesis was not just advanced. It was impossible. "The power source is a contained star," he said to his team, his voice filled with disbelief. "They somehow trapped a small sun at the center of this ship and learned to draw energy from it forever. It has been burning for billions of years without running out." His assistant, a young woman named Lisa, shook her head. "How is that possible?" "Stars have lifespans. They burn out." "Not this one," Michael replied. "They figured out how to keep it stable, how to feed it and sustain it. This one star produces more energy than our entire civilization uses in a year. And there are 12 arcs, each with its own sun." The scale of it was overwhelming. Humanity had struggled for centuries to develop fusion power, and they thought that was an achievement. The first had built miniature suns and put them in ships the size of planets. The gap between human technology and this was like the gap between a candle and a supernova. Sergeant Lavra Blake stood guard at the entrance to the power core chamber. She was a soldier, not a scientist, but she understood the importance of what they had found. Her job was to protect the people working inside the Genesis and to make sure no one who should not be there got in. So far, that job had been easy. The Ark would not let anyone except humans inside. But Lara remained alert. She had served long enough to know that when something valuable was discovered, trouble always followed Dot in another part of the Genesis. Emma Park had found something even more important than the power core. Deep in the heart of the Ark, in a chamber that looked like a cathedral made of light, she had awakened the Keeper. The Keeper was not alive in any normal sense. It was an artificial intelligence, a thinking machine built by the first to watch over their ships. It had slept for billions of years, waiting for the right moment to wake up. When Emma touched the control pillar in its chamber, the Keeper opened its eyes for the first time since before Earth existed. It appeared as a figure of soft blue light. Human in shape, but not quite human in detail. Its voice was gentle, like a parent speaking to a child. "You have returned," the Keeper said to Emma. "I knew you would, eventually. Time means little to me. I have watched galaxies form and die while waiting for this day." Emma stood before the glowing figure, feeling small but not afraid. "What are you?" she asked. "I am a guide," the Keeper answered. "I was created to help the children of the first understand their inheritance. You have many questions. Ask them." Emma had spent weeks preparing for this moment. She had written down hundreds of questions, organized them by importance. But standing here now, only one question mattered. Who were we? She asked. Who were the first, and why did they leave? The Keeper's light flickered, almost like a smile. "The first were you. Or rather, you are the first. Long ago, before this galaxy was fully formed, a species arose on a world that no longer exists. They called themselves human, just as you do. They spread across the universe, learned its secrets, and grew in wisdom and power." Emma listened as the Keeper told the story of humanity's forgotten past. The first had reached a level of development that modern species could not imagine. They had unlocked the ability to travel anywhere in the universe instantly. They could create matter from pure energy. They could even manipulate time itself. But with all that power, they faced a choice. They could stay in the physical universe forever, becoming gods over everything that existed. Or they could transcend, leaving their bodies behind and becoming something entirely new. They chose to transcend, the Keeper explained. They believed that staying would prevent new life from developing naturally. They wanted the universe to be free, to grow its own civilizations without being controlled by ancient masters. But they did not want their legacy to be lost, Emma realized. So they built the Arks. Yes, they seeded many worlds with their genetic material, knowing that new human civilizations would arise over time. They built 12 Arks and hid them where they would be found only when their children were ready. Emma thought about this. Humanity had forgotten everything. They had started over on Earth, climbing from primitive beginnings to spaceflight, thinking they were a new species. But they were the descendants of the oldest race in existence. "What is inside the other Arks?" she asked. The Keeper's light brightened. "Each Ark contains different gifts. Some hold technology for travel, others for creation. One Ark contains weapons capable of destroying stars. Another holds the knowledge to build new worlds from nothing. Together, the 12 Arks give their inheritors power over all physical reality." The weight of those words pressed down on Emma like a mountain. "That is too much power for anyone," she said quietly. "That is why the first left this choice to you," the Keeper replied. "Power is not good or evil on its own. It is what you do with it that matters. Your ancestors trusted that their children would choose wisely." Emma thought about the Galactic Council, about the fear she had seen in Overseer Varnak's eyes. She thought about the history of humanity, the wars and cruelty, but also the kindness and sacrifice. Were they ready for this? Could any species be ready for this? She did not know the answer, but she knew they had to try. Over the following weeks, the Keeper shared more and more knowledge with Emma and her team. They learned that the 12 Arcs were scattered across the galaxy, hidden in places no one would think to look. Some were buried inside dead planets. Others floated in the empty void between stars. One was hidden inside a black hole, protected by technology that should not exist. They also learned that the Arcs were connected. When all 12 were activated, they would form a network that could reshape the galaxy. Travel would become instant. Energy would become unlimited. The boundaries that had divided species for millions of years would disappear. It was a future that could bring peace or destruction, depending on who controlled it. Michael Reed worked constantly to understand the technology well enough to explain it to others. Laura Blake trained new security teams to protect the growing number of human scientists on the Genesis. Captain David Cole, who had returned with the main fleet, helped coordinate the search for the other 11 Arcs, and Emma Park spent her days with the Keeper, learning everything she could about the First and their dreams for humanity. One evening, as the artificial sun at the core of the Genesis set in its programmed cycle, Emma sat alone in the cathedral chamber. The Keeper's light glowed softly beside her. "Are you afraid?" the Keeper asked. "Yes," Emma admitted. "The galaxy is afraid of us. Some species are already talking about attacking before we become too powerful." "Fear is natural," the Keeper said. "Power always creates fear. But the First believed in you. They believed that their children would choose compassion over conquest. I hope they were right." Emma looked at the beautiful light that filled the chamber, at the evidence of a civilization that had reached the peak of existence and then stepped aside so that new life could flourish. "I hope they were right too," she said. Outside the Genesis, the galaxy watched and waited. Humanity had found something that changed everything. What they did next would determine the fate of every living thing in the stars. The war room of the Resolute was filled with tense silence. Admiral Grace Mitchell stood at the center, staring at a holographic map of the galaxy. Red markers showed enemy positions. There were thousands of them, more than she had ever seen gathered in one place. "They are coming," she said simply. Ambassador Daniel Kim stood beside her, his face pale. For months, he had tried to prevent this through diplomacy. He had spoken to the Galactic Council, promised that humanity would share the Ark's technology peacefully, assured them that humans had no plans for conquest. But fear had won over reason. A coalition of species had formed in secret. They called themselves the Preservation Alliance. Their goal was simple: destroy the Genesis before humanity could unlock its full power. They believed that no single species should control technology that could reshape the universe. Grace understood their fear. If the situation were reversed, humanity might have done the same thing. But understanding did not mean acceptance. She would not let them destroy what belonged to her people. "How many ships?" she asked. An officer checked the readings. "Over 8,000 warships from 12 different species. They will arrive in 6 hours." Grace closed her eyes for a moment. The human fleet around the Genesis numbered only 500 ships. They were outgunned more than 15 to 1. In any normal battle, they would be destroyed completely. But this was not a normal battle. She opened her eyes. "Send a message to all ships. Tell them to hold position around the Genesis. We do not fire first. We defend only." "Admiral," the officer said carefully, "we cannot win a defensive battle against those numbers." "I know," Grace replied, "but we are not trying to win. We are trying to survive long enough for Dr. Park to do her job." Inside the Genesis, Emma Park was running through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. The Keeper moved beside her, a figure of light keeping pace with her steps. "The defensive systems require full integration," the Keeper explained as they moved. "You must connect your mind directly to the Ark. It will recognize your patterns and respond to your commands. Emma had avoided this step. Full integration meant linking her consciousness to a ship the size of a planet. It meant becoming part of something so vast that she might lose herself in it. But there was no more time for caution. "What happens if I lose control?" she asked. "You will not lose control," the keeper assured her. "You are a child of the First. This technology was built for you. Trust yourself." They reached the central command chamber, a room filled with pillar of light that rose from the floor to the ceiling. Emma stood before the tallest pillar and took a deep breath. "How do I do this?" "Place your hands on the pillar and open your mind. The Genesis will do the rest." Emma reached out and touched the light. Pain and wonder flooded through her instantly. She felt the Genesis as if it were her own body. She felt the star at its core burning like a heart. She felt the 12,000 kilometers of crystal walls as if they were her skin. She felt the ancient machinery waking up, responding to her touch like a sleeping giant stirring from dreams. Outside, the Preservation Alliance fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel and formed up for attack. Thousands of warships pointed their weapons at the Genesis, ready to fire on command. On the bridge of the largest Alliance ship, Overseer Vornik watched with grim satisfaction. He had tried to warn the Council about humanity. He had told them that these young creatures were dangerous. Now he would prove it by destroying their prize. "All ships, prepare to fire," he ordered. "Target the crystalline vessel. Do not stop until it is dust." The Alliance fleet opened fire. Beams of energy and waves of missiles streaked across space toward the Genesis. The human defensive fleet tried to intercept them, but there were too many. Ships exploded as they threw themselves in front of the attacks. Captain David Cole, commanding a cruiser near the front line, watched as vessel after vessel was torn apart. "Hold the line," he shouted into his communicator. "Buy them more time." But time was running out. Inside the Genesis, Emma screamed as she felt the attacks hitting the Ark's outer shell. The Genesis was strong, incredibly strong, but even it could not take this punishment forever. She had to act. "Show me the defensive systems," she commanded. The keeper guided her mind deeper into the Ark's structure. She found what she was looking for, a system so powerful that it made everything else look simple. The First had built weapons into the Genesis, weapons that could destroy attacking ships with a thought. Emma could feel them waiting to be used. She could end this battle in seconds. One command, and every Alliance ship would be turned to ash. But she hesitated. Sergeant Lavra Blake burst into the command chamber, her face covered in sweat and fear. "Dr. Park, the outer hull is failing. We need to fight back now." Emma looked at her with eyes that glowed with the Genesis's light. "If I fight back, I will kill them all. They are killing us." "I know." Emma's voice was strangely calm, even as chaos raged outside. "But if we become the monsters they fear, we prove them right. There has to be another way." She searched through the Genesis's systems, looking for something that could protect without destroying. And she found it. The First had built more than weapons. They had built shields that could cover entire solar systems. They had built technology that could disable ships without harming the crews inside. They had prepared for this moment, knowing that their children would face fear and violence. Emma made her choice. The Genesis pulsed with light. A wave of energy exploded outward, passing through every ship in the area like a ghost passing through walls. When it touched the human ships, nothing happened. But when it touched the Alliance vessels, their weapons went dead. Their engines stopped. Their ships drifted, helpless but unharmed. 8,000 warships were disabled in an instant. Without a single death, the battle was over. On the bridge of his darkened ship, Overseer Vornik stared at his useless controls in disbelief. All their planning, all their firepower, and humanity had stopped them with a thought. Not destroyed them. Stop them. Admiral Grace. Mitchell's voice came over every communication channel in the system. This is Admiral Mitchell of the United Earth Fleet. Your attack has failed, but your lives have been spared. We could have destroyed you. We chose not to. Humanity does not seek conquest or revenge. We want peace. She paused, and her voice softened. We understand your fear. Any species would be afraid of power like this. But we are not your enemies. The first left these arcs to us, not as weapons of domination, but as tools for building a better future. We will share what we learn. We will help anyone who asks. But we will not be bullied, and we will not be destroyed. This galaxy is big enough for all of us. The message ended. In the command chamber of the Genesis, Emma slowly withdrew her mind from the ship's systems. She collapsed to her knees, exhausted beyond words. Laura Blake caught her before she hit the floor. You did it, Laura said. You saved us. Emma looked up at the keeper, who watched with an expression that might have been pride. The first were right, the keeper said softly. Their children choose wisely. Outside, the disabled Alliance ships began to drift. Emergency systems activated, keeping their crews alive. In a few hours, humanity would send ships to help repair them and send them home. No demands. No punishment. Just mercy. Across the galaxy, news of the battle spread. Species who had joined the Alliance out of fear now felt something new. Shame, perhaps, or wonder. Humanity had been attacked by overwhelming force, and they had responded with restraint. The galaxy had expected monsters. Instead, they found something else. Hope. 1 year had passed since the battle at the Genesis. In that time, everything had changed. Humanity had found all 12 arcs. They were scattered across the galaxy, just as the Keeper had said. One had been buried inside a frozen moon. Another floated in the darkness between galaxies, waiting in absolute solitude. The last arc had been hidden inside a black hole, protected by shields that bent space itself. Each recovery was a miracle. Each arc was a gift beyond price. Now, the 12 planet-sized ships hung in formation around a point in space that had once been empty. Their crystal surfaces caught the light of distant stars and reflected it back like jewels. They were the most beautiful things anyone had ever seen. Dr. Michael Reed stood on a viewing platform inside the Genesis, watching the final preparations. His hair had turned gray over the past year, and his eyes carried a weight that had not been there before. He had learned more about physics in 12 months than humanity had learned in 3 centuries. He had touched the edge of infinity. The network is ready, he said into his communicator. All 12 arcs are linked. We can activate the system whenever you give the order. On the bridge of the Genesis, Admiral Grace Mitchell nodded. She had retired from active military service 3 months ago, but she had come back for this moment. Some things were too important to miss. Dr. Park? Grace asked. Are you ready? Emma Park stood at the center of the bridge, her eyes closed. She had changed more than anyone over the past year. The Genesis had become part of her, and she had become part of it. She was still human, still herself, but she was also something more. She was the heart of an arc, the first in billions of years. I am ready, Emma said. Her voice carried a strange echo, as if it came from somewhere very far away. Ambassador Daniel Kim watched from the side of the bridge, standing next to Overseer Vornak. The alien's stone face was impossible to read, but he had been quieter since the battle. The attack he had led had failed, but humanity had not punished him. Instead, they had welcomed him back as an observer. They said they wanted the galaxy to see what would happen next. What exactly will happen when the network activates? Vornak asked. Michael answered from his viewing platform. The 12 arcs will create stable pathways through space. Instant travel between any 2 points in the galaxy. No more months of faster-than-light travel. No more isolation. Any ship can use the pathways, not just human ships. We are opening doors that have been closed forever. Vornak was silent for a long moment. And the energy technology? The power of contained stars? We will share that too, Grace said. Every species that wants it will receive the knowledge to build their own power systems. No more energy shortages. No more scarcity. Enough for everyone. Vornak looked at her with his glowing blue eyes. Why? You could keep these things for yourselves. You could rule the galaxy. Grace smiled sadly. We could. But that is not who we want to be. Emma opened her eyes. They glowed with soft golden light, the same light that had burned in the halls of the Genesis for billions of years. The first faced the same choice, she said. They had ultimate power. They could have become gods over everything that existed. Instead, they stepped aside so that new life could grow freely. They trusted that their children would make the same choice. She looked at Vornak directly. We choose to be worthy of that trust. Emma raised her hands, and the Genesis responded. Its core star burned brighter. Energy flowed through channels that connected all 12 arcs. Across the galaxy, doorways opened in the fabric of space. Golden rings that led everywhere and nowhere. The network was active. Within hours, the first ships from other species began testing the pathways. A vessel from Vornak's homeworld traveled across the entire galaxy in seconds, arriving at a world that would have taken years to reach. Traders discovered that they could move goods instantly from one side of civilization to the other. Scientists realized that research could be shared across impossible distances. The galaxy shrank, and in shrinking, it came together. Captain David Cole had also retired after the battle. He had returned to Earth, to a small house by the ocean where he had grown up. But on the day the network activated, he watched the news feeds with tears in his eyes. Emma had sent him a personal message before the activation. In it, she had thanked him for having the courage to launch that first probe into the brown dwarf. Without that decision, none of this would have happened. Humanity would still be the young species that everyone dismissed, struggling for respect in a galaxy that did not care about them. Now, they were the ones lifting everyone else up. The months that followed were not easy. Change is never easy, even when it is good change. Some species resisted. Some individuals tried to abuse the new technology. There were conflicts and arguments and moments when everything seemed ready to fall apart. But humanity held the line. They shared freely and punished rarely. They offered help to anyone who asked and protection to anyone who needed it. They built hospitals on worlds that had never known medicine, and schools on worlds that had never known writing. They did not conquer. They served. 1 year after the network's activation, a ceremony was held at the Genesis. Representatives from every species in the galaxy gathered in the great cathedral chamber where Emma had first spoken to the Keeper. They came to witness something that had never happened before. The Keeper appeared in its pillar of light, speaking to the gathered crowd for the first time. The first left this galaxy billions of years ago, it said. They did so because they believed that new life deserved the freedom to grow without ancient masters controlling its path. But they also left a promise. They said that one day, their children would return and complete what they had started. The Keeper's light flickered, and images appeared in the air. Images of a galaxy united. Images of species that had been enemies working together. Images of suffering that had ended and joy that had begun. The promise is fulfilled, the Keeper said. Not through conquest or domination, but through compassion and sacrifice. The children of the first have proven worthy of their inheritance. Emma stepped forward, still glowing with the light of the Genesis. But beside her stood Grace, and David, and Michael, and Laura, and Daniel, and hundreds of others who had played their part in this moment. They were all children of the first. They had all chosen wisely. We do not know what the future holds, Emma said to the gathered representatives. The galaxy is vast, and there is so much we still do not understand. But we know this: you are not alone. None of us are alone. We are one family, spread across the stars, and we will face whatever comes together. Vornak stepped forward from the crowd. His stone face moved in an expression that no human had ever seen on his species before. It took a moment for the translators to understand what it meant. He was smiling. When we attacked you, Vornak said, we expected you to destroy us. When you spared us, we expected you to demand surrender. When you shared your technology, we expected a trap. We were wrong about everything. He paused, and his glowing eyes looked at Emma with something that might have been respect. We feared you because we did not understand you. Now we understand. You are not conquerors. You are builders, and we are honored to build beside you. The chamber filled with the sounds of 1,000 different species expressing agreement. It was not applause, not exactly. It was something deeper: recognition, acceptance. Hoped out outside the Genesis, the galaxy spread in all directions, filled with stars and worlds and the dreams of countless beings. The 12 arcs floated in their formation, doorways to everywhere, beacons of light in the endless dark. And somewhere, beyond space and time, beyond all that could be measured or understood, the first watched their children with pride. They had chosen to transcend. They had chosen to step aside. They had trusted that one day, after countless ages, their descendants would find the arcs and use them not for power, but for peace. They had been right. The galaxy, which had prepared for war and destruction, could only stand in silence at what humanity chose to become. Not rulers, not gods, just neighbors reaching out with open hands. Emma looked out at the stars from her place at the heart of the Genesis. She thought about the long journey that had brought them here, from that first probe into the brown dwarf to this moment of cosmic unity. She thought about all the choices they had made, all the temptations they had resisted. The Keeper's light glowed beside her. What happens now? She asked. Now, the Keeper said, you live. You grow. You explore. The universe is vast and there is so much to discover. Your journey has only just begun. Emma smiled, thought it was true. They had inherited the stars. They had proven worthy of the trust placed in them. They had turned fear into hope and enemies into friends. And out there, beyond the known galaxy, beyond everything that had been mapped or imagined, new mysteries waited. New challenges. New wonders. Humanity would face them all, together.